everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the ColdCast. I'm your host, Dr. Anna Johnson, and I'm Vice President of Corporate Development and Marketing here at United States Cold Storage. Today, we have a very exciting guest that we're going to talk to. Her name is Sara Cook, and while she is relatively new on the U.S. cold scene, she's been around quite a long time in sustainability, and she's going to talk to us about our journey on sustainability, where we stand, what our priorities are, and just in general, what the industry thinks about sustainability. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you, Anna. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes.
And at U.S. Cold, for that matter.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I wore green because today is all about green and sustainability.
And I chose blue on accident. But it kind of goes.
Well, before we get started, can you give us a little bit of background? I know you're fairly new here, but what's your kind of history?
So, interestingly, I've been in and around in sustainability adjacent for most of my adult life.
Okay.
I've worked in recycling, in air quality as one of those dreaded regulators, and then I spent a little over a decade in the cement and mining industry, and then I also worked at a nonprofit working on conservation issues, so mostly around wildlife and nature.
Okay.
So U.S. Cold, though, was my step back into how to operationalize sustainability. So I was really excited about the opportunity, and of course the people really made the process pretty simple, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we started on this journey a few years ago. Swire is our parent company. They're very much about, because they're a family company, they're about continuity and making sure that we have sustainable resources and investments, right? So how do you think about, and what were you tasked with focusing on for sustainability?
Well, you set that up really nicely, but I want to step back and say something that most people probably don't realize.
Yeah.
U.S. Cold was doing sustainability initiatives before we put the term to it, and I'll be very specific in that a little later when we talk more about the details. But I do want to commend the organization, because not only are we providing food security to our communities, which is essential to sustainability, but in terms of our warehouse efficiency and even some of the approaches we take with customers really do illustrate the essence of sustainability, which is profitability while you're balancing the needs of communities and environment. So here, we've now coined the phrase, I think, in the last few years due to leadership in our sustainability team, that people, planet, and performance are how we're going to pursue connecting sustainability to those business decisions, and also use that to guide investments in a way that's practical but balanced.
Yes.
So if that makes sense.
It does, because I think sustainability is a little bit confusing.
Yes.
And I think when we first all heard it, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance, there's a little bit of concern about it, and, what is it going to take over? So can you talk a little bit about, how we define sustainability, how we think about it here, and then kind of what makes it important?
Yeah, so one of the things I want to say is I think we've all embraced, from Swire, our parent company, to our executive leadership, to right down to our employee base, we've embraced the concept that sustainability is about participation. And we're doing that both internally and then also through the industry efforts that we're making, our leadership with our partners, and then on kind of a global participation scale with some of the initiatives we're going to be pursuing in the coming years. But what I want to kind of iterate is sustainability isn't something more. It's actually just a way of bringing all these threads together.
Okay.
And hopefully, as our team evolves, and our job is to help connect the concept to the reality. So we'd like that performance to be measured at the individual level.
Yeah. And so from an import perspective, how important is it? Is it partially driven by customers? Is it driven by our own needs? What's the kind of running theme on that?
Well, I think if you've seen the news in the last 2 years, let's say, regardless of your kind of principles, businesses need to have an answer for increased interest by the public on how products are made, how consumers receive those products, and how you make decisions. So there's a transparency requirement there, and then people want choices that are better for their children, that are better for their communities and are also, believe it or not, affordable.
Right.
So
right.
again, we come back to balance. And I think there is a tremendous amount of pressure, especially in our sector, because we're delivering food products.
Right.
So there's pressure from customers, which we call clients here. There's also kind of interest from our industry partners. So there's partnership opportunities. And then I think we have a growing employee base that wants to understand how we can do things slightly better.
Right.
So it's definitely part of most businesses, at least in my experience, their conversation from the board level all the way down to the warehouse floor.
Yeah, and I think, one of our board members mentioned, hey, this is for the companies that she sits on the board of, this is a fairly new concept for a lot of people. But to your point, we've been doing this for a while, whether it's solar panels or trying to, lower our costs. Because again, as an industry, we're cost of goods, right?
Yep.
We're part of that total cost of goods that has to go into the product. So the less expensive we are, the better off we're able to be competitive and be able to give our customers, value out of their supply chain. So in terms of U.S. Cold sustainability priorities, what do those look like?
So we've made 2 commitments, and I think that those commitments speak largely to that participation component.
Okay, perfect.
And those commitments are around some realities of our business. So our business is very dependent on electricity and energy.
Yes.
So our first commitment is that we're going to reduce our reliance on traditional grid power, and we're going to green our energy supply.
Okay.
And the target is actually to achieve a 30% reduction in our energy consumption from traditional fuels.
Okay.
So that's natural gas and coal.
Okay.
So
How do
what
you
we'd
do
like
that?
to do, so what we'd like to do is we'd like to make investments in generating our own power. So
Okay.
there's a number of activities that are underway to add solar panels to our portfolio, and that's going to account for about 25% of that 30% target.
Okay.
And then we're also exploring purchasing greener energy.
Okay.
So there's already utility scale solar and wind projects that are out there producing power today, geothermal as well. And we'd like to tap into those markets. So there's market solutions we can add to that.
Okay.
So in the short term, we'd love to green our energy supply. And then in the long term, we're joining the business community and the global community, and we're saying we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. What does that mean? It means we're still going to produce emissions. We're doing that right now when we're talking.
Right.
But we're going to neutralize those emissions and be net zero
Okay.
by some of the decisions we're going to make as a business, investments we're going to make in both our own infrastructure and also in our supply chain.
I think we have about 10 solar projects underway right now in terms of implementation. Has there been, and I kind of feel like at some point there was a scale that kind of tipped where it's affordable, it's realistic, because for a long time you couldn't do anything solar, right? It was like it had to be sunny out, it had to be beautiful, it had to be perfect weather. So what has changed recently that's caused us to now be able to pursue these solar projects?
Yeah, I would say the appetite.
Okay.
Financially, we have some support from our parent company, Swire.
Yep.
So there's actually programs to kind of close the gap in affordability.
Okay.
There's also an appetite from leadership. There is a market conditions are returning where supply chain is rebounding after the pandemic and some of the issues and challenges getting materials. I also think there's some policy making that's gone into place, specifically the IRA or policies that are intended to help subsidize through tax incentives purchasing this equipment from the residential rooftop to the industrial setting. So there's partners actually in the government for once to help support this process and to help make it economical and affordable for companies to make that initial high investment for a greater return over time.
Yeah. So because for a long time it didn't make sense, we needed to be able to make money, we need to be able to save our customers money, and we didn't want to do anything without it being practical and budget friendly. So I think that, kind of with the government and some of the other policies and the affordability now of a lot of those solar panels, we're able to make those decisions. So let's kind of turn a little bit and talk about a little bit about technology.
Sure.
Because I think that also influences our ability to be able to be profitable and to make these kind of decisions. So how does that kind of promote sustainability?
Well, technology is essential.
Yeah.
And the reason is, first of all, if we're just talking about solar infrastructure, there's a high degree of technology there, from raw material extraction, mining, to the production, to the utilization and the maintenance of that equipment. So I think whether it's solar specific or broadly, I think the globe is relying on innovation in technologies to improve not only the precision of data collection and how we're capturing what we're doing and the impact it has, but then also on the solutions. So the solutions come in many forms. They come in kind of industry-based solutions like emissions control devices. They come in products and services like carbon capture systems. There's even discussion of different materials that prevent material from going to a landfill, for example.
Right.
And in an energy standpoint, it could be that they're carbon sequestering rather than carbon producing.
What does that mean?
That means by being built, a building could potentially house and or absorb carbon from our atmosphere.
Oh, okay.
Storing it there,
right,
like our oceans do. So it's a really interesting kind of landscape because innovation, technology, you're bringing the private sector where innovation is traditionally driven and resourced, and we're adding kind of other ingredients to that. We're adding community partnerships and kind of a broader interest to that. And large brands across the globe are working together to find these solutions.
So, from a technology perspective, how do we track and account for our green energy savings, whatever it is that we need to capture and be able to report back and reflect back to our customers?
Yeah, we're actually piloting a few different techniques to do that at 5 of our warehouses this year. It was one of our objectives because the visibility and we call it data granularity is critical. We need to understand in real time, not retroactively looking at it a year later, what our emissions look like. So we're looking to combat our challenges with data by exploring different software and solutions at the warehouse level to give warehouses also insight into energy utilization at a different scale.
So they can make data-driven decisions at the time, in real time, for real. And then, are customers asking us for that information?
Yes, we got a request yesterday, actually, from one of our customers. So they want to understand what we're doing. They want to know what our targets are. They want to know, what our plans are. And we're careful in how we articulate that because we're still piloting and kind of exploring those solutions. But I think the interest is coming and it will continue to increase, especially for the brands and the clients that are publicly traded.
Yes,
so they have public obligations. Yeah.
Right. And so they need to go back to their suppliers, and we won't get into that today because it's very
that's another
scope 3 level tracking.
And there's
we'll talk about that later, but
there's better people on our team too to talk about the complexities there.
Yes, but we do see we see more and more asking us, again, what's our carbon emission footprint?
Yep.
How are we saving money? How are we going to save them money by being able to report on all these things?
Yep.
So Earth Day was in April.
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about Earth Day and how you think about it influencing the global awareness, right? Because it used to be Earth Day was like plant a tree. Now it's Earth Day is how do we sustainably invest in our in our future.
Yeah, so one thing I want to say about Earth Day, and most people may not know this, Earth Day is an American tradition.
Oh, interesting.
So it was founded in 1970. The first Earth Day was some college kids and a few communities in major cities across the U.S. getting upset about the conditions their communities were in. And it was during a time of our nation's history where people were getting together, convening, and challenging, the institutions that govern us. And what's cool about it is now it's in over 120 countries.
Oh, really?
And the 52nd year is coming up.
Yep.
And even during the pandemic, there were actually 2 Earth Day celebrations, the actual birthday and the half birthday.
Oh.
So it is growing. It's now a movement. It's not just a day. It's a movement. And one of the things that I think is interesting or inspiring about it is you can connect that back to U.S. Coal.
Yeah.
We can call it sustainability, but we're doing it every day in the ways we're operating our warehouses and the ways we're treating our employees and in the community impacts we're having. Yep. So it's not different. It's not separate. And I think that's what I've learned from Earth Day over time. And you're right, it did start as one tree, and now it's communities getting together and partnering for thousands of trees.
And from an employee perspective, from a cold crew, as the demographic changes and we have a younger generation coming up, they want to feel that they're connected to the planet and that it's part of our culture. So I love that, we're trying to not only just, bring it into our community, but also bring it into the cold crew and kind of make that part of our culture. So, again, we were, when you talk about sustainability and ESG and all of these big words, it's a little scary. So what are some common misconceptions about sustainability?
Well, it's similar to the Earth Day one.
Yeah.
It's been around since 1987, the UN actually said. It's really allowing for the needs of today's generation to be met while not jeopardizing future generations. That's so broad, but it's so simple.
Yep.
It's taking care of what we need today, water, fertile soils, and our human communities, so that we can succeed. Yeah. And in our economies, we also need business to be profitable and to be successful, because
to be sustainable. Right.
Our cultures and our communities rely on these products and services. So that's the other piece, is we cannot overstep. It's not just us versus them as a business community anymore. And so, really, sustainability is taking care of today, but thinking about the future.
Okay. So, what are some misconceptions maybe that somebody might think
that as individuals we can't participate.
Okay.
So
that's a good
one. We can make simple decisions. Yeah. So it's not the way U.S. Cold as a business organization and family addresses sustainability might look different, but the tactics and techniques are all there. So we have the ability as individual employees to make smarter decisions on a day-to-day basis that improve our health, improve how we feel about ourselves, and also reduce waste or are mindful of resources. Something as simple as what we've done in our warehouses, going LED. You can do that at home for pennies on the dollar. Save yourself money over time and actually have a more sustainable bulb in your home.
And you never really think about that. You just think it's a big warehouse project, but you don't really think about how that could actually transition into your own, to your own personal environment. So when we think about greenhouse gas emissions, we think about carbon footprint. What are some other ways that what are some other steps we're taking to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions? Yeah,
so it's overwhelming to think about it technically. We've been talking a little bit about it, but I think some of the most important steps are we have our green energy plan. And that relates specifically to those targets I mentioned above with respect to how we're going to reduce our reliance on traditional fossil fuel generated utility power. We're going to do that a number of ways. Okay. But one of the most critical ways to that is reduce the amount we're using. And so again, it's the continuation of our efficiency gains we've been making for 20 years. So performance at the warehouse level is crucial to that component. So our green energy plan includes those two things. It's how do we have greener power? How do we invest in greener power? How do we bring it to our warehouses? And then how do we continue to see those gains in efficiency and improving how we do our business better? And that leads to cost savings. It leads to outcompeting our competition. It leads to also being able to pass those savings to our client base.
So how did we arrive at those strategies, those tactics, if you will? Well, how do we get there?
That's a great question, and I don't want to speak for leadership, but I can tell you that in most businesses, they're tackling the things that are in front of us that we can control. Okay. So one of the challenges with dealing with emissions is that most of them come from our supply chain. Right. And we don't have business control over every client and every trucking hauler that supports our logistics services. So what we're doing there might look different. But our technical expertise lies in controlling what we have, the assets we manage, educating our employees, engaging our expertise. We have a lot of expertise in this business in solving these problems, engineering these solutions out of our business. And that's going to account for about 30 to 35% of our total emissions.
So for those that we do have control of, when we talk about transportation and consolidation, how do we make sure that our fleet is operating sustainably?
Well, we've done a couple of things in the short term. So we're piloting an EV refrigeration unit right now in California. And California is very progressive in terms of the policies and the incentives that they offer to businesses. But We're also looking at potentially using an EV railcar mover down in Florida, where there isn't as much policy and incentive. So we're tapping into our partnership with Swire. We're tapping into partners in our vendors.
Yeah.
And then we're also talking as operational units on how we can make those gains in a practical way in the short term. Because if we don't start looking at them now, they're just going to get more expensive later. We're still going to have to address
and we're
them.
going to be behind.
Correct.
Right?
And we want to be best in cold, and that's we do that by making those decisions.
When we
now.
look at those electric, lumber trucks, I mean, when you think about it, you think, okay, well, we're trying to, take, carbon emissions off the table, but at the same time, it does have benefits for the truck driver, right?
Correct. They're usually easier to maintain.
Yep.
I mean, that's why people love their Teslas.
Right.
And yes, they still emit carbon. Let's be clear. In the manufacture of this equipment, we're producing emissions. And then because they're charged electrically, we're going back to the grid. But again, we're linking those priorities. So we're relying on our ability to essentially green up our power supply. And at the same time invest in the technologies that you mentioned before, and the mechanical equipment we need to support the progress of really the industry, and that actually supports our suppliers as well. Right. So us investing in that or looking at that and testing those now helps make the business case for them to continue to manufacture those. And again, because of some of the policy decisions that have been made in the last couple of years, there are now more incentives that are going to last longer to advance those technologies.
So have we established any partnerships with other organizations that are kind of like sustainably focused that drive some of this initiative or innovation?
Yeah, and I can point to one. I just sat in on the CSR committee.
Oh, cool.
And we were talking about GCCA, and we're talking about reducing food waste.
Yes.
So that's not really energy-based, but what we're talking about is how can we help inform an industry-wide approach to the shame of throwing away food.
It is.
And it's hard for everyone, whether you're at the warehouse or you're the brand. So we're working there. We're also exploring with some of our vendors some of those partnerships. So we can have partners that are business oriented as well. And then kind of exciting is that we're actually going to be pursuing federal funding to help us implement some of these solutions over time through the Department of Energy, which is one of the few federal agencies that's focused on business solutions. It's in their mandate that we tackle industry emissions, and so they're actually supporting innovation, and they're looking to partner with companies to find those solutions. So there's some really cool things on the horizon.
How does Swire play into this? So they're, they're a parent company, and they have a lot of businesses underneath their private and public sector. So how do they think about it, and how do they support us?
So I will caveat this by saying I've been here for about 90 days, but I met Swire early on, including Barnaby. And what I'm learning is the commitment extends all the way up to the top. So we are number 2 in their energy emissions in terms of their company portfolio because of our electricity requirements. We're number 3 in water usage. Okay. So they've kind of targeted us as help us get cleaner, but it also helps us do better, perform better, and meet our targets as well. So what they're doing, they have provided a number of resources and support just in the short time I've been here. They're collaborating with our executive leadership at a much higher level than myself. And then further, they have opportunities through their Sustainable Development Fund to help us close that gap on funding. So if something is just cost prohibitive, as we were talking about earlier, to invest in, they'll consider, if we make a business case, supporting the kind of the difference between the sticker price and what we would ordinarily buy, which is less sustainable.
Okay. So they kind of support additional innovation and additional, kind of, hey, can we test this out? Can we try this out so that we can make those better decisions going forward and kind of do that?
And they've already done that. So on the solar side of the projects you referred to earlier, U.S. Cold is investing about $58 million in that, and that's just what we've approved and what's underway. By 2030, it'll be double that. It'll be almost $100 million by the company. Well, now Swire is matching about $8 million of that on those first 10 projects. So while it's not huge. It's a good percentage of the
Right.
total cost, and then we're hoping to continue that trend. So we've
Right.
set some precedent now. We have a lot of support from our parent company. So that's a really good example of where they're putting their money literally
Yeah.
where their mouth is. They're expecting us to do better, and they're helping fund those decisions, make it a little bit of a softer landing.
Well, so their motto is esse quam videre, which is to be rather than to seem to be. So, when we think about the future and the future of sustainability, what are some other initiatives that we have on the horizon that we're going to kind of, make happen?
Great question. So they have Swire Thrive.
Mm-hmm.
So they have expectations that all of our operating companies participate in climate-based initiatives. For us, it's things we've been talking
Right.
about. We're also needing to focus on people.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're already doing that. We're
Right.
doing that in safety. We're doing that in our human resources. We're doing that in CSR.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of CSR, we have a community pillar we're going to be hitting.
Okay. Yes.
We also are going to be looking at water, and then, of course, as a business, where are you without governance?
Mm-hmm.
So there's structures, mechanisms, and things like sustainable development policies,
Right.
that are gonna prop up and serve as the base of the pyramid, so to
Yeah.
speak, as we climb that mountain
Yeah.
and get to. I used a lot of metaphors there that don't even they're mixed. That's what my English teacher would call a mixed metaphor. But we, really, they're there to support that and give us the structure to do that. And
Right.
we then take that structure and we find the U.S. Cold way to function in that structure. We do not abandon our culture. We do not abandon our priorities. They're not asking us to. They just want to give us a frame.
Yep.
And then we navigate that
To be
frame.
able to
and
fit our objectives into it and work within that. Yes. And I think, from a leadership perspective, everyone is on board. And, I think that obviously you guys have a lot of work to do. That keep
been
you
busy.
very, very busy, yes. But I think for this, for the initial ColdCast, what we wanted to do is really just kind of talk about, how we think about sustainability, how it applies to us, and then how some other, cold storage companies could start to take these steps to make their business more sustainable in the future.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much, Sarah. That was
Yeah,
great. It's great conversation.
It's complex.
Yes,
I
we could
hope,
talk for a very long time
yeah.
about this. Yes.
I hope our future conversations are more about the fun things,
Right,
and,
yes.
and we could talk about some tangibles.
Absolutely.
But I appreciate the opportunity,
Yes.
and of course appreciate being here. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to help share the message, and we look forward to
Well,
talking
great.
more.
Well, welcome to US Cold, and we
Yeah.
look forward to seeing
Thank
all the
you.
great stuff you're going to do.
I appreciate that.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. Bye, guys. Stay cool.